Good morning. My name is Gord Perks and I am the chair of the Toronto and East York Community Council. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum present, so I'd like to now call meeting 28 to order. Welcome, everybody. Today's meeting is being held by video conference. City staff are also connecting to the meeting by video conference. The public will continue to participate electronically and can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com Toronto City Council Live. I ask everyone for their patience with any delays and technical issues. The clerk staff have also connected registered speakers to the meeting by audio. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Toronto and East York Community Council page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. IT staff will also be available to assist members with their devices. As part of each agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hands, unmute their microphones if they wish to speak. I will then create a speakers list and will call on members when it is their turn to speak. When voting on an item or a motion, I ask members to ensure that they have their video on and to raise their hands to indicate their vote. Members, I want to remind you that you must submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at Toronto East York Community Council at toronto.ca to help with motions. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the Community Council would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Members, are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes from the meeting held on September 9th, 20? Councillor Wong-Tam, all those in favour, opposed, carried.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a brief
one moment, please. One moment.
Brief remarks.
One moment, please. Okay, Councillor Layton, I'm aware of what you need to do. I just have to do a couple of things first. So, before we start the rundown on today's agenda, I want to alert members that there are 3 items which were added in error. I'm going to now place a motion to withdraw these 3 items. The items are TE 28.10, 1007 Craven Road, notice of intention to designate a property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and authority to enter into a heritage easement agreement, Ward 14. That item will be actually properly before the Planning and Housing Committee. Toronto East York 28.17, 1799 St. Clair Avenue West, official plan amendment, zoning amendment, and drafted plan of subdivision applications, preliminary report, Ward 9. That item also is properly placed before Planning and Housing. Item TE 28.34, parking amendments, Sackville Street and Amelia Street, Ward 13. That item was added in error as the conditions for it returning to this committee have not yet been met. So, you have the motion to withdraw those items. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Councillor Layton, you had a point of privilege?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would just like to bring it in with the deepest sadness that I bring news and condolences for the loss of a member of the Ward 11 community that had often made deputations at this committee. Edward Lehman was an internationally known author and planner. While much of his professional work wasn't in the city of Toronto, he did design systems and approaches for measuring risk for cities, mostly from climate change, around the world in Bangkok, Manila, in Ho Chi Minh City and elsewhere. He was an author of books about development and regional policy, and development finance and regional policy, as well as developed the first regional development working paper for the OECD. Edward contributed enormously to the Annex community as chair of the Development and Rezoning Committee. That is probably one of the most professional planning bodies that I've ever worked with outside of our own City of Toronto staff. It's remarkable what they've put together, and the group was led by Edward. While passionate about planning policy, also very professional and very practical in their approach for negotiating with development and with city planning and with the councillor's office. He was an enormous help to me when the changes when the ward boundaries changed, and he was able to bring the annex's concerns over growth as well as a blueprint for how they would like to be engaged in the new city council arrangement. He was also a friend and a really easy guy to talk to, very honest, but again, as I said, practical about what we could do as a city and as a community. And I'm going to miss him. I'm going to miss calling him for advice and looking to him for his guidance and his leadership in a very rapidly developing part of the city, because I believe his fingerprints can be seen in many of the new developments in the community, and he's a lot of the reason why we didn't end up just fighting at the board time and time again. He's surrounded by his friends, his family, and I have no doubt that his legacy will continue with a strong community voice in development with the Annex, but I will miss him greatly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Layton.
Chair, do you mind if I
Councillor Cressy, the floor is yours.
The councillor's comments for 30 seconds. And I appreciate the committee's indulgence here. Councillor Layton said it all about Edward. The news of his passing came as a tremendous shock and was quite sudden to many of us. I had the privilege prior to Councillor Layton taking over the Annex of working closely with Edward for years. And listen, this was a man who, you know, that old saying that communities have a right to say no to things that will harm them, but a fundamental responsibility to say yes to changes that will improve them and make them more inclusive. You know, that old adage, that was Edward Lehman to a T. He gave his time, his expertise, and his incredible patience and passion to building a better and more inclusive Annex at all times. It was just, this is such a sudden passing for so many in our downtown communities. And I just want to echo Councillor Layton's deepest condolences to our community and to Edward's family. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, later on the agenda, we will be considering item TE 28.5, which is a request for directions report on a zoning application in Ward 4. It's 1540 to 1550 Bloor Street West. It's my intention that we should consider some of the items in camera. My proposal is that for this or any other matter that we need to go in camera for, because of the complexity of closing the meeting, asking staff and deputants to leave, and then returning to the meeting and asking everyone to reconnect, I'm going to propose that we do the public portion at the scheduled time, but that we hold the in-camera portion and do it or any other in-camera items at the end of the meeting. Is that satisfactory to members? I see heads nodding. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right. With that, our agenda run through today begins at item TE 28.13, changes to business improvement area boards of management. Councillors Bailão or Layton? Councillor Bailão, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.14, 88 Queen Street West Public Art Plan. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you. I move to adopt the staff recommendations.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.15, traffic safety conditions and review of North Riverdale neighborhood. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, I'll move the staff recommendation to receive for information, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.16, request to name 149 Bleecker Street to Bleecker Parkette. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to move the staff recommendations and to thank them for their help. We have a number of small little park spaces in the Ward 13, the new amalgamated Ward 13, and we realized that we call them big park and little park. Oftentimes they sit adjacent or directly across from each other. This was one great example. We're just doing the best we can to make sure that all these significant park spaces, well-used, cherished park spaces, are going to have a proper name. So we all know where to find it. It's on Bleecker Street.
Thank you. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.17, 1799 St. Clair Avenue West, official plan amendment, zoning amendment, and draft plan of subdivision applications, preliminary report. Councillor Bailao. Oh, sorry, this is one of the ones we removed. My bad. That's my first mistake, for those of you who are keeping count. Item TE 28.18, 39 through 53 Fraser Avenue, 8 through 42 Pardee Avenue, and 135 Liberty Street, zoning amendment application, preliminary report. Councillor Cressy.
I'll move the staff recommendations. Thank you.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.19, 310, 320, and 330 Front Street West, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application, preliminary report. Councillor Cressy.
I'll move the staff recommendations. Thank you.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.20, 148 Avenue Road and 220 through 234 Davenport Road, zoning amendment application, preliminary report. Councillor Layton.
I'll move the staff recommendations.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.21, 287, 289, and 291 Christie Street, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application, preliminary report. Councillor Layton.
I'll move the staff recommendations and just say this is an incredibly exciting project with the Scott Mission that's bringing 100% affordable housing building and replacing existing shelter space on site. It really, and they're taking the right approach to engaging the community. Everything is looking good here. So knock on wood, I hope to have a final report as soon as we possibly can.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.22, 502 and 508 through 510 Spadina Avenue, Scott Mission, zoning amendment application.
I'm sorry, the comments.
Yeah, I
my
know.
Previous comments were on this item,
Yes.
not the last one. I won't repeat them, but delete them as they pertain to Christie Street and insert here. Thank you. I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Layton and I have now each made one mistake, if you're keeping score. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.23, 145 St. George Street, zoning bylaw amendment and rental housing demolition application, preliminary report. Councillor Layton. Oh, we
So I
have a
have a motion that I
deputation on
worked
this.
on with staff.
Sorry, my fault.
Oh.
Now I'm in the lead for mistakes. I didn't have a deputation.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Could you just confirm that the deputant is from the Annex Residents Association, and this is not in the annex, so I'm just wondering if you want to confirm that that's in the right place.
It's in the annex.
Councillor
It's in the
Fletcher,
annex, Paul.
Councillor
Yeah,
Fletcher,
no, don't worry.
additionally, any person can make a deputation on any item.
No, I understand
Yeah.
sometimes it.
Sorry, we're just having a little bit of a paperwork shuffle here.
That was your George Street, Kristen.
Can I just work off this for now? Yeah, okay, thank you. No. That's fine, that's fine. Right. Item TE 28.24, 438 through 440 Avenue Road, and 169, 17A, and 17B Balmoral Avenue, official plan amendment, zoning amendment, and rental housing demolition applications, preliminary report. Councillor Matlow.
Morning. I'll move, I'll move the report along with the expanded notice.
Councillor Matlow, is this a motion you would wanted to move?
That's correct.
Okay. So we'll take the motion and the item together. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.25, 150 through 164 Eglinton Avenue East, and 134 and 140 Redpath Avenue, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application, preliminary report. Councillor Matlow.
Ditto. So I'll move the report along with the expanded notice.
All right, we'll take the amendment and the item together. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.27, 91 through 101 Raglan Avenue, zoning bylaw amendment and rental housing demolition application, preliminary report. Oh, we didn't do 26. I am so sorry. Councillor Matlow, you've got way too much on this agenda for me to keep track of. Item TE 28.26, 744 through 758 Mount Pleasant Road, zoning bylaw amendment application, preliminary report. Councillor Matlow.
Move the reports along with the expanded notice, and hoping that I have dinner available at some point in the midst of all that.
Okay, taking them together, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.27, 91 through 101 Raglan Avenue, zoning bylaw amendment and rental housing demolition application, preliminary report. Councillor Matlow.
I move the report along with the expanded notice area.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.28, 98 through 100 Bond Street and 54 through 74 Dundas Street East, zoning amendment application, preliminary report. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, I have a motion. I'd like to move to amend. And it's going to be on the screen very shortly. The motion is to ensure that we can add some provisions to the consultation process, and that includes making sure that all accommodations are available to residents and stakeholders as they need them. This would, of course, include sign language interpretation, closed captioning, provision of childcare, those type of things. And also there's a second motion. The second motion is to I think it's coming on the screen. The second motion is to direct the Director of City Planning to work with all the
Councillor
different
Wong-Tam?
divisions.
Councillor Wong-Tam?
Yes.
I'm very, very sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you. Staff have only received one motion from you on this item, so I'm going to suggest we hold it and come back to it when you've had a chance to sort that out. Fair enough?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, very good, thank you. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to clarify, are you folks hearing feedback on your audio, or is that just me? Everyone, okay, great.
Okay, we're
not
not
great,
getting
but,
that in the committee room, so we'll have IT investigate it.
Thank you.
Item TE 28.29, 25 St. Mary Street, official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and rental housing demolition applications, preliminary report. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Thank you. I'd like to hold that down. I'm working on a motion.
Okay. Item TE 28.30, construction staging area, 55 through 61 Charles Street East. This is either Councillor Layton or Councillor Wong-Tam.
Most of it's in Councillor Wong-Tam's ward.
Yes, just across the street. Thank you. I'd like to move a motion, please.
Councillor Wong-Tam, again, I'm very, very sorry. The clerks do not have a motion from you on this item.
Oh, okay.
We'll hold
I
it.
know it was sent, so we'll sort that out. Thank you.
Yep. Item TE 28.31, construction staging area, TTC Easier Access Program, Greenwood Station, stages 2 to 4. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. I have a motion that we send this to City Council without recommendation. These are, of course, very difficult sites because the station has been there for many years, and this is now an easy access in the middle of a neighborhood. So there's a whole myriad of requirements in order to maintain. So this will help us get to that, including asking for an electric charging station for people that are now unable to park in their driveway. Thank you.
Okay. On the motion to send it to council without recommendations, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.32, construction staging area, 1249 Queen Street East. Councillor Fletcher.
Same thing, Mr. Chair. I'm going to send this without recommendations. This is, we have to look at this in light of the Gardner takedown, the Lakeshore closure, which will be going on for so long, and how we can make sure that Queen Street is pretty free and clear coming into the East End. And I think we know what that feels like, Councillor Bradford and myself, with a lot of closures. And for the BIAs, it's very tough. So we'll have a little look and see if anything can be done differently than taking up an entire lane and removing parking on the north side. Thank you.
Thank you. To the IT staff, the screen that I have is missing Councillor Matlow, so I can't see all members. There we go. Okay. Thank you. So on the motion to send it to council without recommendations, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.33, accessible parking spaces, October 2021, delegated. I'll move the staff recommendations. Any members have amendments or comments? No? All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.34 was withdrawn. Item TE 28.35, pay and display parking, Dundas Street West. I'll move the staff recommendations. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.36, pay and display parking, Dundas Street West between Shaw Street and Grace Street. Councillor Cressy.
I'll move the staff recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.37, realignment of permit parking area 8B to exclude the development at 17 Boothroyd Avenue. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, like to pass the following motion, Chair. I believe that the gentleman has that. And this was a TLAP one, not a rezoning. And now it's being added on after that has successfully gone through the TLAB. But
Councillor, your sound dropped out for a moment there. Did you say you had a motion on this item?
Yes, exclude the development. Yeah, the staff recommendation.
Oh, just the staff recommendations. Okay.
Yes.
Very good. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Extension, item TE 2838, extension of permit parking hours, Fiskin Avenue. I'll move the staff recommendations. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.39, speed limit reduction, Lords Lane and Homewood Avenue. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to move the staff recommendations to reduce the speed from 50 to 30 kilometers. And just comment that it's a bit unusual that we have to do these speed reductions street by street. I guess this is the process that we have, but we can expect many more of these from us. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.40, traffic control signals, Broadview Avenue. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations in the supplemental report, Mr. Chair, and thank Ms. Gray, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Clement, who's recently come into the South District. This has been a long-running issue. Riverdale Park is on the other side of Broadview, and crossing to it is quite treacherous for families. We upgraded it, new rink, everything, and not a safe crossing. So this will allow for a safe crossing for all the kids in Riverdale who want to play hockey, pleasure skate, go swimming, play basketball, play tennis. It's a great upgrade. And I do want to thank the staff for moving this forward. Thank you. It's also widely supported by the community in a petition. Thanks.
Okay. So on Councillor Fletcher's motion, which is from the supplementary report, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.41, traffic control signals and traffic regulations, Lansdowne Avenue and Lansdowne Avenue East Branch, private driveway. Councillor Bailao.
Good morning. Move staff recommendations.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.42, appointments to the Swansea Town Hall Board of Management. I'll move the staff recommendations. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.43, appointment of interest group members to the Swansea Town Hall Board of Management. I'll move the staff recommendations. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.44, appointment to the Eastview Neighbourhood Community Centre Board of Management. Councillor Fletcher.
Very happy to reappoint Monica Delane to that board.
Okay. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.45, appointments to the Community Centre 55 Board of Management. Councillor Bradford.
I'd like to move the staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.46, Councillor Bailao, a speed hump installation on Brandon Avenue.
Move the recommendations in the letter.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.47, speed hump installation on Silverthorn Avenue. Councillor Bailão.
Move recommendations in, move recommendations in the letter.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.48, speed bump installation on First East-West Public Lane, south of Eversfield Road, west of Dufferin Street, and the First North-South Public Lane, east of Boone Avenue, north of Rogers Road. Councillor Bailão.
Move recommendations in the letter.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.49, realignment of permit parking area 13G to exclude 898 through 900 St. Clair Avenue West. Councillor Bailão.
Move recommendations in the letter.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Good to see that the post office box in Ward 9 is working well. Item TE 28.50, parking amendment, Queens Wharf Road. Councillor Cressy.
I will move the staff recommendations. Thank you.
There are no staff recommendations. This is a letter from you.
I will move the recommendations in my.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. I need a motion to add items TE 28.51 through TE 28.60. Councillor Wong Tam, all those in favor, opposed, carried. We'll take them now as they were pre-circulated. Item TE 28.51, amendments to traffic regulations for speed hump installation on Brock Avenue. Councillor Bailão.
Move recommendations in the letter.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.52, speed hump installation on Turnbury Avenue. Councillor Bailão.
Move recommendations in the letter.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.53, parking amendments, Richardson Street. Councillor Cressy.
Will move the recommendations in my letter. Thank you.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.54, commercial loading zone, 133 Hazelton Avenue. Councillor Layton.
I'll move the recommendations in the letter.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.55, parking amendments, Hudson Drive. Councillor Layton.
I'll move the recommendations under.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.56, speed limit reductions on Welland Avenue between Moore Avenue and St. Clair Avenue East. Councillor Layton.
I'll move the recommendations in the letter, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.57, Milverton Boulevard, additional speed hump. Councillor Fletcher.
Recommendation in the letter, please, Mr. Chair.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.58, all-way stop at the intersection of Gainsborough Road and Newbold Avenue. Councillor Bradford.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the recommendations in my letter, please.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.59, changes to parking regulations on Foxborough Road to facilitate the installation of a median. Councillor Matlow.
I move the motion. I want to thank the Bradgate Arms, along with the Foxborough Neighborhood Association and city staff for the many years of hard work that finally is arriving at a resolution, and I appreciate the team effort.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.60, Gerard Street and Carlaw Avenue, heritage designation update. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes. This is a Church Gerard and Carlaw, it's Dundas and Gerard and Carlaw, but this is an old request that was to be updated. These are all the early industrial buildings in the East End where all the work was. Wrigley's, Colgate, has an incredible industrial heritage. Heritage Toronto has its first walk of 11 plaques celebrating the area, and I would like to have an update from Heritage Preservation Services on that request in November.
Okay, on the recommendations in the letter, all those in favor, opposed, carried. And that completes the run-through. Members, before we go to our first timed item, I've received notes from 3 members who may have some trouble attending should this meeting go on into the afternoon portion, which, you know, it might not. It's a later agenda than usual. But if anyone else is going to be unavailable for any portion of the afternoon, could you please send me a text? We're starting to be close to quorum issues. Okay. Now,
Can I just ask, Mr. Chair, did you have a letter that came in from Councillor Cressy and Mr. Longton and myself here today?
Councillor, we're just getting some feedback from city staff, and as soon as we have that, we'll be back in touch with you and Councillor Fletcher, or Councillor Montan.
Thank you.
I'm aware of this, and when it's sorted out, we'll add it to the agenda at that time. Okay. To the timed items. TE 28.1, naming of a private walkway adjacent to Wellesley subway station. We have no deputants listed. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to move an amendment and to, number 1, have Community Council approve the naming of this very elegant little walkway called Travelers Way. It's, of course, adjacent to the Wellesley subway station, so we think that's a really nice and appropriate name. But also to increase the budget to by $500 and properly go ahead with the fabrication and the installation of the signage. I want to thank the Church Wellesley Neighborhood Association for all their patience and support in having this walkway named. It's actually, I'll just speak very quickly to it. It's not obviously, we have a lot of new construction in the ward, and we have it all across downtown and midtown, as many of you already know. I think that, where we can, we want to be able to provide elegant and safe passageways for pedestrians as opposed to having them walk around the block. So this is actually just one of those ways of ensuring that pedestrians can get from the Dundonald to Wellesley. And I think that for those, it becomes a shortcut to Wellesley Station. We have both the secondary entrance off of Dundonald and then the main entrance off of Wellesley. And surprisingly enough, it took a long time to get this little walkway completed. And it is a private walkway, but we wanted to make sure that we could have it safely lit, which it is now. I've walked it many times over the past while since it's been constructed. And it's actually probably much safer, much more attractive than it was before we actually had the development on Dundonald. So it took a lot of effort for the community to absorb that much construction. There was a huge amount of disruption in the area, and now I am very proud to say it is finished, and we have a nice walkway, which will be properly signed and lit. So thank you very much.
Okay. On the item then, all those in favor, the Councillor Wong-Tam's amendment, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.2, 324 Cherry Street, 429 Lakeshore Boulevard East, Block 1, zoning amendment application, removal of the holding symbol H, final report. Councillor, I should know this. Cressy.
It's me, Gordon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I'll move the approval of staff recommendations.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.3, 324 Cherry Street and 429 Lakeshore Boulevard East, technical amendment to the zoning bylaw, final report. Councillor Cressy.
I will move the staff recommendations, and perhaps just a note, I think it's totally understandable, Chair, that looking at these street addresses, these of course are all in the former Deputy Mayor Pam McConnell's ward. And so I am just carrying on beloved Pam's business here. So I'll move the staff recommendations.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.4, 29 through 39 Pleasant Boulevard, zoning amendment application, final report. We have deputants, 3 listed. First is Tom Giancos. Tom?
Good morning, councillors. I just want to start off by saying we support staff's recommendations, but we also acknowledge that Councillor Matlow will be passing a motion to have the report proceed to council without recommendation to allow the councillor, planning staff, and Kingset Capital, if so invited, to have one further meeting with the community. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank David Dreger, Oren Tamir, James Parak, and Joseph Luck, and especially David Dreger for his incredible work on this file. It's been a 2-year process. It's a COVID application. And there's a lot of back and forth. A lot of changes were made to the application to satisfy planning staff and urban design. We've introduced a brand new park, a POPs that will, I think, transform this node, which is directly across the street from a transit station. And again, just a big thank you to staff, and looking forward to continuing to work with the councillor, the community, and planning staff on this application. Thank you.
Questions for Tom? No, seeing none. Tom, thank you for contributing today. Next, we have listed Ronald Pushchak. Ronald, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Good morning, Ronald. You'll have 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Thanks very much, councillors, city staff, members of the community. We're glad to have this opportunity to present our views on the proposed development at 2939 Pleasant Boulevard. But due to time constraints, I'll present an abridged version of our full submission to council. Our unit, 40 Rosehill Avenue, is directly south of the proposed development. We're not opposed to the development of this property, but we believe that any development should be consistent with the nature of the community. We at 40 Rosehill and our owners strongly recommend that you reject the zoning amendment application for 2939 Pleasant Boulevard. The final report supporting the recommendation is misleading and at a minimum is insufficient. It does not address the concerns and issues raised in the preliminary report of June 25th, 2020. The recommendation is also being submitted before completion of the apartment neighborhood study for the area requested by City Council at its meeting January 29th, 2020. The preliminary report for this zoning bylaw amendment application referred to the importance of the apartments neighborhood study. The apartment neighborhood study is referred to several times in the report, in some instances to justify the proposed development. The apartment neighborhood study would certainly provide context for the suitability of the development in this neighborhood. Therefore, one must question why this recommendation is being rushed before the completion of the apartment neighborhood study. The city has negotiated a $3.6 million payment from the developer. That payment to the city would barely cover the economic impact of the development to our owners at 40 Rosehill Avenue, which I'll elaborate on in a few moments. What I'd like to address with you here is the issues and the impact of the development on our 40 Rosehill Avenue condo and its owners. I'll focus on 5 of the most significant issues. First, the podium. The massive size of the podium has been a concern to us from the very beginning. 40 Rosehill is a small 15-story building. Just the sheer mass of the podium right to the south of the property line will overwhelm 40 Rosehill. The final report from the city planning staff says a lot about the podium on the Pleasant Boulevard side of the building, but makes no mention of the south end of the directly across from 40 Rosehill. We expressed our concerns about the podium in a letter to Kevin Friedrich at the city and copied to the developer dated April 8th, 2020. We were encouraged when responding to our letter, Mr. Giancos, a senior VP of Kingset Capital, wrote that the podium would be reduced in height from 8 stories to 2 to 4 stories, and setback to the south property line has been increased. We were certainly disappointed and discouraged by reviewing the submission drawing showing a nominal 6-story podium on the south elevation. However, the proposed building has a double height ground floor. The effective height of the podium from 40 Rose Hill is therefore 7 stories, not the 2 to 4 stories committed to by KingSett Capital. To add insult to injury, the bottom level looks like a bunker. 40 Rose Hill is only 15 stories. This podium is broader than our structure and would rise to the 8th floor of our building. We would like to remind you that in negotiations for the new tower at Breton Place, 44 Jakes, the podium was eliminated as not being characteristic of the neighborhood. We believe the podium for this development should also be eliminated to allow for more green space around the base of the development. 2939 Pleasant is located on the residential section of the block, which begins east of the Toronto parking garage. The area is in transition from David Balfour Park and the Ravine. Buildings in this area are without exception characterized by significant green space surrounding the buildings. As currently envisaged, the development would be completely out of character with the buildings on the block. Light. Units on the northwest corner of Rose Hill up to the 9th floor will no longer get direct light and will be significantly darker due to the development in its podium. These units would be cornered between the Toronto parking garage and to the east and the development to the north. The owners of these units will suffer significant economic impact due to the value of the units and their poor light. The lane, we welcome the conversion of the east-west portion of the lane to green space. This is consistent with the block as a green transition from the Ravine and Balfour Park. However, the north-south
Ronald, can I ask you for one final thought? You're over your time.
All right, so I'm going to say that the height is envisioned by the City of Toronto. Secondary plan is supposed to be a step down from the building heights at Yonge Street and St. Clair.
Okay, thank you very much, Ronald. Thank you very much.
Right.
Are there any questions for Ronald? Seeing none. Ronald, thank you for coming today and sharing your thoughts with us. I have one more deputy listed, Aaron Platt. Aaron, are you with us?
I am now. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, I can. Thank you so much for being with us today. You'll have 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Aaron Platt. I am counsel with Davies Howe LLP. I believe the clerk has my contact information. We are counsel to Young Pleasant Holdings Limited, and it is the owner of the apartment rental buildings known as 40 to 60 Pleasant Boulevard, just down the street to the east of this particular proposal. It's on the north side, and I have been asked by my client to advise the committee that it is not opposed to the idea of development or significant development on the subject lands. After all, it is across the street from a transit station of a high priority. But it does have some concerns related to a specific aspect of the development and potential impacts, and that relates to vehicular movements along Pleasant Boulevard. I know that there was a package of some visuals that had been emailed out. I know I can't share my screen. I'm not sure if councillors and committee members have that before them, but if you look at page 1 of my visuals, it just identifies the location of the property. And I think, as you will see, Pleasant Boulevard is actually quite an active roadway. And part of the reason for that is there is a TTC bus loop that surrounds my client's property and provides access from buses to the TTC subway station or the St. Clair subway station. And so buses route in, wrap around the building, and then have to come out, and then they go back. They don't travel out westerly to Yonge Street. They travel back along Pleasant and cut in front of the subject proposal in my client's property. And so and it's quite an active bus station, as you can imagine. It is, after all, St. Clair and Yonge. So my client is actually concerned about the interrelationship of general vehicular movements at the proposal and how that might be impacted in combination with particularly the need and the demand for the busing that comes out of the station. I note that emerging trends, particularly in transit supportive areas, demonstrate that there is an increasing demand for lay-by uses and spaces for pickups and drop-offs, whether it's rideshare programs or the increasing amount of online shopping that occurs and the need for various couriers to be arriving, food pickup and drop-off, and what have you. Those types of services are becoming more and more prevalent in these types of communities that are transit focused. People aren't driving with their own cars, but they're actually having a lot more vehicles stopping in front of buildings and dropping things off. There is a loading space, but it's tucked in behind the development, and there isn't actually an appropriate place for cars to park even just briefly in front of the building that would allow the buses to be able to maneuver quite cleanly and through there. So that's really where our clients' principal issues lie. And you can see a picture of sort of some of the traffic pattern in page 2 and 3 of the visuals that was previously circulated. My client asked us to review the transportation impact study that was prepared in conjunction and in support of the application. And when we reviewed that, we noted that the report was silent as to the issue of the potential conflicts between the TTC bus travel and that type of activity in front of the building. We know there aren't a lot of vehicles necessarily coming in and out of the building itself in terms of residents or potentially visitors, but there is a significant concern about that pickup and drop off because, as you're probably aware, those types of vehicles just sort of park in front, throw on their hazards, they try to run in, drop something off with a concierge or what have you. And in the meantime, you could have a backup of TTC vehicles on Pleasant. So we reviewed it, and it doesn't seem that the transportation impact study actually references that question at all. And as a result, we asked to see comments from staff, and staff was excellent about getting back to us. And we saw that the comments from transportation staff at the city and the TTC on this matter didn't speak to the issue at all. And I have to be fair, sometimes when something isn't listed in a report, you sort of miss it. You don't necessarily identify that that's an issue that needs to be covered. It wasn't highlighted in the TIS, the traffic impact statement or assessment. And so it's possible that that was something that might have been overlooked in the process. We don't see any examination for that issue. So again, my client is not opposed to development, particularly significant development on the site. It recognizes its value as a transit supportive neighborhood and the need for development in those places. But we would request, and it's my client's respectful submission, that the application be deferred further so that staff and the TTC can comprehensively examine these concerns and report on the matter. And I know my time is just about up, and I will provide my final comment, which is, one might think that this is actually
Aaron, I'm sorry, you're
site
considerably over time now. I'm going to ask you to stop there. Thank you. Okay, are there any questions for Aaron? Seeing none, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, those are all the deputants that I have listed on the item. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, Councillor Matlow.
Hi. Well, I'm going to be moving to send this to the next City Council meeting without recommendation, and I'll explain why. I had a few choices or options, as we all face from time to time when we're having these kind of development discussions in our communities, and none of them were very good because of the planning regime that we have in Ontario and the infantilizing dynamic that cities have with the province. The reality is that the community, when we last met, was fiercely opposed to this application. As you can hear, there is still significant concern about the application that needs to be discussed and needs to be resolved and faced head on. I know well, though, and I think most of my colleagues, if not all of them, understand as well, that if I simply voted against this today or even deferred it, the applicant would go to the Ontario Lands Tribunal and they'd be going there with a positive report from planning staff. And we understand what the consequences of that means. So it might, politically it's easier, but it's, in good conscience, I'm concerned that we'd be left with a result that would be worse than what we might otherwise achieve. So what I want to do is go back to the community and just have a candid, transparent, honest conversation about what we're dealing with, what we're facing, what choices we actually have here, and then see if we can arrive at least some reasonable consensus together as a community. In the interim, I want to have some more direct conversations about some of these very specific, valid concerns that might well be resolved in the interim. And I've had a conversation with the applicant, and in fairness to them, I don't expect them to go and run to appeal between now and council to allow us that breathing room to be able to have that conversation. So we're going to send out a notice soon to the neighborhood. We're going to set up a meeting, and it'll be difficult, but it's necessary, and I believe it's the right way to go.
Thank you. Any questions of Councillor Matlow? Anyone else wish to speak to the item? All those in favor of the motion to send to council without recommendations? Opposed, if any? That carries. Our next item is TE 28.5, 1540 through 1550 Bloor Street West zoning amendment application. Request for directions report. I have 7 deputants listed. First deputant is Mary Jo Letty. With us, Mary Jo?
Yes, thank you.
Good morning, Mary Jo. So you've got 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the council. I'm joined here today with 4 other people, and they will introduce themselves as they go along. I am a writer. I'm a member of the Order of Canada and one of the founding members of Romero 30 years ago. And our center is directly affected by the property in question today. For the last 30 years, this was formerly called the stockyard. For the animals slaughtered, it was a place of death or destruction. And now it is a way of life that is in danger. Once upon a time, many immigrants chose to settle here because it's affordable. Families often lived in renting out the floors of the source of income. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, is there interference in the sound system?
No, we're all doing well.
Okay. This was called the junction, where the aspirations of many coexisted with a few mansions that were scattered throughout the area. It was mixed income housing. 30 years ago, middle-class professionals and a variety of artisans began to move into the neighborhood. The owners no longer lived in the basements but in renovated homes. At the same time, a few houses opened in the neighborhood, specifically committed to welcoming refugees. In the beginning, there was the inevitable struggle over who would live in what backyards. However, very slowly, the refugees were welcomed into this neighborhood. Refugee children walked to school with their parents and other parents on the way. Winter clothes were left on the porch for refugees who were new to the cold. People began to hire refugees that they knew. Most significantly, neighbors invited the newcomers over for supper. After a few years, the neighborhood went through the process of finding a name, the West Bend. and began to host a fabulous street party every year. The street became the symbol of what was held in common. Having a common good did not mean becoming buddies with each other. It meant relating in ways that were neither too close nor too far away. The street was the place we kept clean, the place where we greeted each other as we put out the garbage, the place of the little libraries that fostered civic culture. We did not need to hire employment counselors for the refugees. We had good neighbors. We did not need to promote classes in Canadian culture. It was walking around every day. There are many programs for refugee resettlement. However, the best program of all is housing refugees in a mixed income neighborhood. There are many other neighborhoods which close to refugees because they are unaffordable. There are many neighborhoods built on the assumption that mixed income neighborhoods are somehow dangerous. I am here today to tell you that living in a mixed income neighborhood brings out the best in each other. Think about what is being proposed by this building, which would likely become a model for other buildings in the area. Think of the small number of units, 12 of the proposed 327 units that are classified as affordable. Think about the other buildings being proposed in the area without a single affordable housing unit. We are not against taller buildings or increased density around a major transit hub. However, we know that the history of this neighborhood and its present reality argues for insisting that any new buildings include the potential for mixed income housing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I turn this over to David Walsh, a realtor in Toronto.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Are there any questions for Mary Jo? Seeing none. David, are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, David. Loud and clear.
Yeah.
Thank you
Chair
for...
and councillors.
Go ahead.
And city staff, appreciate the opportunity to address you. I'm speaking to the financial side and the housing affordability aspect that our group is very concerned with in trying to encourage the mixed income neighborhoods that Mary Jo just described. And I just, say, if we imagine ourselves as a developer in Toronto with plans to build a 6-story building with 94 units, which is what the existing 3 times coverage allows. And the city and the province say they have a site beside our property with another 227 units, and they'll give it to us for free. It's just not right. This developer is being given actually 233 units in our calculations above the existing zoning, with an increase from 94 units to 327 units, which is a 300% increase in density. And I realize that the, the councillors in the city are up against the Ontario Lands Tribunal. It's not just a city issue, it's a provincial jurisdiction as well. But we think it's time to take a stand. These projects are happening throughout the city. Another example is 10 to 16 Wellesley Street West, where 466 condos are being built on a small site of 12,654 square feet. That the current density permits 3 times the lot area. So there's a land value in that's being approved here. We estimate the land value at $140 per square foot. So with 233 units, that's about $32 million. On top of that 32 million, the developer will also, according to our calculations that I've attached, make a profit of 47 million. So we think the 32 million for the increased density should be, for the 233 units, should be allocated to benefits for affordable housing within the development. And I calculated that, we could provide 60 more affordable units on top of the existing 12 for a price of about $250,000 per unit. I'm estimating the market value of the units, the average market value at 750,000. So 60 units at 250,000 would be a real benefit to the community. And we have to stop giving away this extra land value that developers are asking for, and see it as compared to almost like another site. It's it's our land that's being given away. And I've outlined below the overall cost, the $640 a square foot. And I've outlined below how I arrived at the 60 units at $206,000 each. So I think it's really time to face all these developers are rushing their projects through before any inclusionary zoning bylaws come into effect, and there's dozens of them that we're aware of. So City Council somehow has to take a stand here, and we urge you not to approve this particular project, to ask the developer for a much more substantial contribution to affordable housing. Different nonprofit groups could own these units within a development, and there's a great need by nonprofit groups, but we do recognize the private sector has this capability to create and develop condos, so we need to work together. And we need to get away from this all or nothing attitude of the province and face up to what's happening. Thank you, Mr. Chair and councillors.
Thank you. Are there any questions for David? David, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your thinking with us today.
You're welcome.
Next, I have listed Barbara Gordon. Barbara, are you with us?
Yes, thank you. Just making sure you can hear me.
Yes, I can. Barbara, you have 5 minutes. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Thank you. This will be short, not very sweet. I've been a resident of this neighborhood for 40 years. I've raised a family here. I've made a living in Toronto and across the country. And I realize how very fortunate my family and I have been. We've learned over the years that a great city, as Toronto is, it has been named one of the greatest cities in the world. It's a collection of great neighborhoods that educate and enrich each other. And also, we realize that change is a constant. We participated in the Avenue study years ago and were impressed with the city's long-term vision in commissioning it and accepting its guidelines. We also know that density, done right, is a necessity, and that transit hubs are also done right, a necessity. But doing these things right means never forgetting the human element. People not only need places to live that are affordable and suitable for families, but amenities that make city life livable. Things like schools nearby, daycare centers, community spaces for cultural and civic events. To that point specifically, I'm interested in learning what, quote, certain community benefits outlined under separate covered are. Background file 171383. And from that same file, I'm pleased to know that the developer has promised, quote, a communication strategy with the surrounding community, including matters related to the construction of streets or infrastructure and any other matters requested by the chief planner and executive director, city planning, and the city solicitor, end quote. Because aside from the considerable traffic problems that have been addressed by our colleague Aubrey Friesner, without response from either city or developer, by the way, there is a specific question that's been raised by business owners along Bloor Street's north side, and they're concerned that the back alley will be closed off to them, which effectively would result in obvious difficulties for that stretch of Bloor Street and even more traffic congestion in the neighborhood. I feel a great city is also one that has concerned, engaged, and informed citizens. But it's impossible to stay informed when negotiations and agreements and what sounds like a last-minute ultimatum between the city and the developer are confidential and will be divulged only if an agreement is reached in camera. I understand that client-lawyer confidentiality is sometimes necessary, but when we know that fully 34% of political donations last election were from developers, we feel we have the right to be wary of important and influential decisions like this being made without complete transparency to the taxpayers of the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Are there any questions for Barbara? No? Barbara, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. Next, thank you. Next, I have Catherine Mansfield. Catherine?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good morning, Catherine. You'll have 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. My name is Kathy Mansfield, and I'm a neighbor in the community. I'm a member of the board of Romero House, and I'm also a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital in downtown Toronto. I'm asking you today to consider some of the tenets of the inclusionary zoning, which we know is under consideration and hopefully will be passed and become a bill in January 2022. I'm asking you now today, what is the rush to push approval on this development prior to the implementation of inclusionary zoning recommendations? The inclusionary zoning bylaws propose that 3 to 10% of the total gross floor area must be designated for affordable housing for a set time period, as I'm sure you are all well aware. From an investment perspective, a city needs to have enough affordable housing for their essential workers. I work in healthcare, and most of our workers travel a minimum of 45 minutes up to and including 3 hours a day because of lack of access to affordable housing. Staff are leaving healthcare because of many stressors, one of them being the long commute and access to affordable housing. Businesses are also challenged to find staffing for restaurants, and ultimately for their businesses, they do not survive. In short, there is a human resources crisis for essential frontline workers, and a lack of affordable housing in this city is not helping this issue. The estimated average price of the proposed development at 1540 Bloor is $800,000. This price is by no means affordable for the average essential worker. I ask you, what confidential settlement could surpass the need for affordable housing within a development at a major transit hub? A real estate investment is only an investment if it is in a viable, vibrant community. This means a community in which people of mixed income can live and thrive. The city is at a critical juncture with a shortage of affordable housing. Timing is of the essence, and we should not make decisions in haste given the long history of this failed development. We must and we can build better together. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Kathy. Are there any questions for Kathy? No, seeing none. Kathy, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.
Next, I have listed Jack Costello. Jack, are you with us?
Yes, I am here.
Good morning, Jack.
Can you
You'll
hear
have
me?
5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a word on my background is that I too have been with Mary Jo 30 years associated with Romero House for Refugees, and its office is just 4 properties away from the corner under discussion today. For 20 of my years in Toronto, I have been living at Sherbourne and Earl, which, as all of you know, is directly across from St. Jamestown. Serving its people is part of my life. For 10 years before that, I lived in the Annex on Huron Street on Madison, and when not in Toronto, I lived in the USA, Asia, and Europe. And finally, my major work in Toronto has been at Regis College at the University of Toronto, and that has been 30 years, where I was president for 14 of those years. So in that breadth, I feel I know our city quite well in its hopes and its sorrows and its desires. So my statement would be more reflective this way. Toronto, like any city, is indeed about housing. Housing for its families, citizens and workers, playgoers, hockey and baseball and Raptor fans, and visitors of many stripes and colors. People live here and want to be able to live here. People want to make Toronto their home, and they can only do so if we, as a city and city councillors, want them enough to provide affordable housing and housing legislation to meet their needs as workers and their hopes as parents and citizens. It could be said that any city, but Toronto in a very special way, is primarily a verb, not a noun. Toronto has an identity, yes, but that identity is always on the move, and each of us is invited to be an active part of both its identity and its changing in the direction, we hope, of a great inclusion. Toronto is not just a city. It is a city wanting to be a community, full of diversity, yearning for a unity that is fair for all. In fact, being a part of that goal is our joining in on this grand enterprise of what you do regularly, of helping to build our city as a community. And at the heart of forming community with one another, we mean helping to create a more humane, just, and convivial society. Community shouldn't happen here only as a feeling, such as when the Leafs or the Jays or the Raptors are doing well. It's a way of being. Community is a way of saying and showing that everybody counts. At the very heart of this grand enterprise of taking a city and making it more and more a just and caring community is affordable housing. Building a city community and joining in on creating a neighborhood as community requires housing that is decent and affordable. We mean housing that people of various income levels can afford and live in with comfort and dignity. We need a city in which people seeking housing for their families are not driven mercilessly by prices, but rather that prices are shaped by the economic capacity of people and by the care of this city for their welfare. That means affordable housing requires laws that work for everyone, but especially for the most needy. Our group's conviction and goal is to encourage and even pressure developers to express a public and clear interest themselves in contributing to creating a more humane and convivial society in every part of the city. We ask and require developers to become contributors to a vision in which competition is an acceptable factor, but it lies within a vision, a larger vision of cooperation. And even cooperation.
Jack, Jack, you're at the end of your time. I'm going to ask you if you have one final thing to say.
I would say it this way. From the perspective of caring for affordability in housing, developers and those among us, the developers can still make money, but we urgently require that they join us consciously and willingly into providing housing at an affordable level that truly built as can.
Thank you very much, Jack.
Very much.
Are there any questions for Jack? No? Jack, thank you for adding your thinking to our deliberations here today. Next.
Thank you.
Next, I have Jim Baxter. Jim, are you with us?
Hi.
Hi, Jim.
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Jim, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. You can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you for listening to me. I've been living in the community for 30 years. I think I am actively working in the community. I'm vice chair of the West Bend Community Association. I'm vice president of the West Bend Green Community. I'm also director on the Junction Historical Conservation District. I'm not quite sure why we're here today, because this was almost exactly the same project was discussed 10 years ago. The community rose up and rejected it. It was rejected at Community Council, or Committee of Adjustments. It was rejected at the OMB, one of the few developments that went in the favor of the community. We were active. Gord, you were instrumental in getting an avenue study done for Dundas and Bloor. I think it proposed that 12 stories was appropriate for this corner. Giraffe was rejected. The developer now, Timber Trim, has bought this property knowing full well the limitations on that property. How they have the you-know-what to come back and say, no, we want the original proposal of 25, now 27 stories, because the building at 2375, which is just north of Crossway Towers, has applied and got the 27 stories. They're ignoring the fact that that tower, which is the back tower, is at least 30 meters off the street. It won't have the wind impact that this one will. Crossway Towers, which everybody admits was a mistake, they are also this height, and I believe they're 30 meters off of Dundas and they're 30 meters off of Bloor. So how they can propose the same height and be within a meter or two of the street, it's preposterous. It's too big, too much massing. It's been mentioned that the affordable housing issue is not addressed. And they're proposing the 12 affordable housings, which is only for 10 years. So it's a very short term. So I would hope that Council will reject this proposal, and I guess we'll see them at Ontario Land Tribunal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Am I still with you?
Yeah, you are.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Jim? Jim, as always, thank you for sharing your thinking on this item.
Thanks, Gord.
Next, I have listed Christy McCallum. Christy, are
Hello,
you here?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Christy, I can.
Yes, I am.
I'm going to give you 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Okay. So I, like many of the other speakers, have lived in this area for many, many years, 25 years, and I am also a family physician, and I have been practicing medicine in this community for the same number of years. Like as the previous speaker mentioned, I don't know why we're here. I was shocked when I looked at the supposed negotiated or revised proposal and found that rather than a decrease in the height, it had actually gone up by 2 stories from 25 to 27. So my major objection well, certainly the housing issue, as other people have addressed, but my major objection is the height. I was bicycling. I'm 64 years old with osteoporosis, meaning I can fracture very easily if I have a fall. I was bicycling up Dundas, just opposite the crossways, and was right in between the area where there would have been a huge wind tunnel. There already was a wind tunnel created by a unilateral high-rise, namely the crossways. I was nearly blown over from my bike. I had to get up. I had to get off my bike and cross the street and walk on Edna Avenue where I wasn't at risk of being blown over. So if the giraffes were built, I would not have had Edna Avenue to escape from. I probably would have been blown over. And, you know, that particular intersection is one that is used by many, many vulnerable people. As a family doctor, I refer many, many low-income families with small children to the public health dental clinic that's in the crossways. They're coming out of the subway and then having to cross the street. Also, you know, there are seniors who go to that same dental clinic. And that same demographic of low-income people, of seniors and young families with young children go to the No Frills directly across the street to do their shopping for affordable food. And so all those people would be at risk for being literally blown over. It's just not on. And, you know, we want to be encouraging people to be cycling, to be walking rather than driving. And I don't see having a massive, massive wind tunnel is going to promote that. So I think it's terrible planning. And I would support the original Avenue proposal of restricting the height to 10 stories. I think it's crazy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christy. Are there any questions? No? Seeing none? Christy, thanks so much for contributing today. Okay, members, I think that is all the deputants I have listed on this item. Members, I'm going to be moving later in the meeting that we go in camera to consider this item. So I'm going to stand down the debate on this until after we've had the in-camera session. Okay. That takes us next to TE 28.6, 3194 to 3206 Dundas Street West, zoning bylaw amendment and site plan applications request for direction. I have no deputants on this, so I'm going to move the staff recommendations. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Item TE 28.7, 1405, 1407, 1409, and 1409A Bloor Street West, and 229, 231, 231A Sterling Road, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications, request for direction. I have 2 deputants listed. First, Rupert Ong. Rupert? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Rupert, if you could make sure that you've connected your microphone, we're all turned on at this end. Rupert, I'm sorry. We're going to have someone from the clerk's IT staff get in touch with you to see if we can rectify your problem, but I'm going to have to move along. Next, I have Jenny Stiglitz. Jenny? Or Jeannie?
Hello, this is Jeannie Stiglitz.
Hi, Jeannie. Sorry I got your name wrong. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Thanks. My name is Jeannie Stiglitz. I'm a longtime resident of Bloor and Lansdowne, and I'm calling because I'd like City Council to oppose this plan and to support city staff in opposing it. I have several reasons, and I know I have 5 minutes, so this is going to be a quick recitation of reasons. Number one, this proposal absolutely does not fit the neighborhood and contributes nothing to the neighborhood in terms of livability and in terms of a new interesting project. One of the things I'd like to point out is that this has very few balconies, no balconies on Bloor Street, no balconies for many of the apartments, which are 400 square feet or less. We have just been through a pandemic where people have been confined to their apartments, and yet we're going to allow a developer to build new apartment units, many of them tiny, with absolutely no access to outdoor space directly from their apartments. I think that as well as being unfriendly, this is unhealthy and should be subject to redesigning. There's going to be at least 1,000 people living in this construction, and they're going to be living in glass and steel, which brings me to my next point. I believe that this project and all projects should be at the cutting edge of carbon neutral technology. And I'm not sure that that's the case with this. I know that many developers are saying that they meet the city standards, but this is 2021 going into 2022, and we should be urging them to exceed and to actually set some standards. I'd like to move on to the issue of parks now. This area between Lansdowne and Dundas has one of the lowest ratios of parkland in all of Toronto. The applicant is proposing to build a 400 square meter park. That's 20 meters by 20 meters. I think you'll all remember the Olympics, the 100-meter dash, which Olympic athletes can do in 10 seconds. Well, 20 meters takes 2 seconds to cross. So that indicates the postage size of this park. It's unacceptable. And that's because the applicant is trying to maximize their usage of the land with no attention to the residents who will be living in the place. I'd like to move on now to traffic. Their traffic study uses data primarily from 2016 from a 77-unit apartment on Dovercourt. And how is this acceptable? We're in 2021. Why are we using 2016 data? In addition to that, we all know that Uber Eats, and other ride systems have become very popular, increasing traffic, especially around high density areas. So all the traffic numbers, in my opinion, are wrong. I'd like to move on to employment now. 4 auto body shops will be wiped off the face of Bloor Street. I don't understand why we cannot have businesses such as auto body shops in downtown areas anymore. People drive cars, their cars break down. What's wrong with having some real businesses in this area and not just more coffee shops? And I'd like to move on to now the issue of what I think may happen, which is potentially deceptive advertising. There is advertising going on by developers with regards to proximity to TTC, UP Express, schools, parks. Well, when we recover post-pandemic, you will not be able to get onto the TTC That was the case before the pandemic started at Dundas West and Lansdowne. You could barely get on the TTC. I don't see how that's going to be any better. Schools, perhaps, but we're going to have about 10,000 people living in that area. Will there really be room for these new children to be going to the schools? The first thing I notice that developers do is put up signs saying that they're not guaranteeing any access to local schools. So for all of these reasons, I really urge you to support the city planning, to go to the land tribunal if necessary, and certainly to work with the applicant to better the proposal, because this area deserves better and should not be a hodgepodge of makeshift developments and plans. Thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Nope, seeing none. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Next, thank you, Jeannie. That's the only deputant I had, or the last deputant I had listed on this item. Rupert is back with us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Rupert. Welcome. I'm glad you got here.
Hi.
So I'm going to give you 5
Glad to
minutes
be here.
to address the committee.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, City Councillors, Ms. Anna Balau, and Ms. Victoria Fuse. My name is Rupert Ong, and I've been living in Toronto for about 20 years, and I do currently live in Bloordale. Now, I'm not against the growth and increased density, but I want it to be responsible and in line with the existing community, and hopefully integrates with it. So that being said, I implore you to reject both of these proposals as they are. The proposal for 1405, 1407, 1409, and 1409A Bloor Street, I believe that's the Brad J. Lamb proposal. Just so you know, these buildings are to be built on a very narrow and triangular plot of land, and I believe this project is currently in the hands of the Ontario Land Tribunal. The 18, 12, and 4-story towers that are proposed are just far too much building for this size of land, and I believe he's got no public realm planned. It'll also cast shadow on all the townhomes and semi-detached homes that are surrounded right now. This project also primarily consists of like single bedrooms and studios, which we all know will just be purchased by investors for Airbnb. So it'll really do nothing to accommodate the influx of people, like families, actually moving and living in Toronto over the next decade. It will also cause, in my opinion, severe traffic along Sterling and Bloor. Where Sterling lines up with Bloor, it's now this tiny road due to parking from existing homes, and this project is just going to make it substantially worse. Now for the proposal on 229, 231, and 231A Sterling, I believe that's by the Mutso Group. This plot of land isn't really on Bloor. Rather, its primary entrance is along Rutan Road and Merchant Lane. These proposed buildings are actually nestled by existing townhome complexes and a condo. These roads are actually kind of small entranceway roads meant for cars from the two townhouse complexes and the one condo. So each townhouse complex is about 40 plus suites, and the condo is about 214 suites. And these roads are really meant for cars from their parking garages to enter and exit. I don't think these roads can really accommodate this condo project as it's proposed. The impact on Sterling Road and the small private road in front of the current artist lofts on this plot is already felt, as cars are already speeding down here to avoid congestion on Bloor, making it incredibly dangerous to walk or bike. And the construction of these buildings will, again, just make that much worse. The proposal as it stands is 29, 24, and 20 stories for the 3 towers, and it is far too high and dense for this area and completely out of line with other proposals. And I don't believe there's any real plan for public realm. And I'm not quite sure if they've made any plans to accommodate the vibrant artist community that lives there right now and that they'll currently displace. just to give you guys a bit of scope within the area, there's about 11 plus condo towers proposed within this area, which is about like a 4 block radius. So given that size, it makes it a risk of becoming the next Liberty Village, where there's nothing but tall condos, one street for ingress and egress, and no services like parks, daycare, schools, splash pads, viable retail services for families, given that area's density. Bloordale, as far as I know, is like full of 30 and 40-year-olds with kids, like primarily young families. We don't need single bedroom condos for Airbnb investments. If you're going to build, like, make it a reasonable height for families, and also take into consideration that people need room and space, public amenities, and viable services. I also feel like these buildings do nothing to address affordable housing. For example, there is a project called the House of Assembly beside the Museum of Contemporary Art, and their condos are listed at $720 for their base units. So to close, I won't take up much of your time, but please only approve proposals that integrate with and respect the community and are somewhat affordable for average Torontonians. And also, please have a plan for infrastructure, services, space, public realm for this coming influx of people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rupert. Are there any questions? No, seeing none. Those are all the deputants on this item. Are there any questions of staff? No? Councillor Bailão.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move staff recommendations to have staff going to the board and oppose this application. There was the preliminary report with a list of issues with the application, very detailed list, and the issues continue. And so this is not an application that the community, and I don't think we should be supporting. So I'd like to move staff recommendations.
Okay. Any questions of the mover? Seeing none. I need my screen before I can call the vote. Oh no, I've got quorum there. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Next. What time is it? Okay. Item TE 28.8, 954, 956, and 958 Broadview Avenue and 72 Chester Hill Road, official plan and zoning amendment application, request for direction report. We have 6 deputants listed. First, Reinhold Veit. Reinhold, are you with us?
Yeah, hello.
Hello, welcome.
Hello.
Reinhold, I'm going to give you,
Can you
5
hear me?
minutes. Yes, I can. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Okay. Well, thank you for allowing me to present. I have lived on Chester Hill Road, adjacent to this proposal, since 1969, and my family has had the good fortune of being able to purchase other properties on the street. So we happen to own number 52 and number 66 Chester Hill Road that are directly adjacent to the proposed high-rise development. So the 2 houses we have are rented out as single family houses, and we consider the rents that we do charge reasonable for them. Now, for a long time, I've been following the progress of this Estonian house sale per se. And we were surprised that DK Broadview, the applicant, was suddenly indicated as a new owner for the property a couple of years ago. Of course, as you know, there had been a tentative proposal by Revera Senior Retirement Organization to purchase the property, but that was conditional. Now, what I'm about to tell you, you can very easily confirm its verity by simply Googling the words DK Broadview, because there are multiple Estonian newspaper items reporting on this subject. So with regard to the history, Kilmer Development was initially consulting with the Estonian Society, and one of their employees was working with the Estonians during the sale process to Revera. But suddenly, and unknown to most of the other Estonian Society members, Kilmer had formed a new company called DK Broadview, along with Diamond Corporation, to purchase this property. It was virtually an overnight process. Others in the Estonian community had other ideas for the property. Now, the reported selling price for this group of properties is $15 million, and DK Broadview had to take out an $11 million loan from CIBC at 25% interest. I'm sure they've paid most of that back by now because it doesn't make business sense. Now, at the first of the community meetings that we had with Councillor Fletcher, we heard Steve Diamond state, and I quote, "I can get this done," with regard to his proposals. And why would he be so confident? Well, it's because he's an insider in the development process. He is chair of Waterfront Toronto, and that is an entity created by the federal, provincial, and municipal government. He's an insider. He knows how the system works. So what we now have is a proposal that I think the Toronto City's report very rightly sent back to the developer on September 16th to make modifications. And there's no point in my repeating other objections to this proposal that have been so clearly presented for you in the report for action and others in the surrounding communities, including the subsequent speakers. So the price paid by the developer for the property is based on the size of the building that DK Broadview was expecting to be able to construct there. But the price paid must not influence your decisions about what is best for the community. Thank you very much for my opportunity here.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No?
Yes, I just have one question.
Oh,
for
sure.
Mr.
Councillor
Duke,
Fletcher.
because Last time he was here, and Mr. Chair, I'm very low on battery. I'm going to have to switch machines shortly. But you didn't get a chance. I didn't get a chance to ask you any questions. It was near the end of the day, and we got cut off. But this has been going on for an awful long time. I think it's about 5 or 6 years that this property's been in limbo and back and forth, and these differences in the Estonian community that you pointed out have not helped the situation. Would you agree with that?
You're asking me?
Yeah. Mr.
Yeah, absolutely. The Estonians were quite disappointed in this because they had other ideas for the property, but it got sucked out from under them like pulling a carpet away.
And there's kind of two different approaches in that community. There's something that is being built over on Madison Avenue. Is that right? Do I have that right?
That's right. They needed the money in order to construct the new Estonian Center near that Tallinn place along Bloor Street, just past the museum. They've got a nice new building going up there.
So this is part of that bigger deal. And there was a Broadview Avenue study that was done that has certain parameters for this property and others that's at the OMB. So there's a whole number of things. There's a zoning appeal, there's the site-specific appeal, there's the heightened density appeal. And you support the city going to the LPAT or OLT, whatever the name of it is now, to for this discussion, since the developer has now pressed the button on the LPAT or to be at the tribunal. So the report before us, you are fully in support.
The September 16th report, yes.
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Reinhold, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today. Next, I have David Hayes. David, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, David, welcome. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So like Reinhold, I am a resident of Chester Hill Road, so I live at number 64. I obviously have a vested interest in the outcome of DK's proposal for the development of the Estonian House site. Now, first of all, I want to say that I'm not opposed to development at this or any other site. I really believe that vibrant communities are created when all stakeholders are dutifully consulted. So I really do appreciate the role that the city and its various departments have taken in this particular development as well. And I really hope that a satisfactory outcome can be reached certainly at the Ontario Land Tribunal where the appeal was headed. So as Reinhold suggested, as you're aware, Diamond Kilmer is not the first company interested in the development of this Estonian House site, but they are the first, I assume, who have decided to actually buy the property, which influences their desire to see a strong return on that $15 million investment. Now, I strongly believe, though, that this desire should not supersede the fact that the proposed amendments to their application still fail to address many of the significant issues that have been expressed by community members. So first of all, according to the city's Tall Buildings Planning Report, high-rises such as that proposed should have a setback of 12.5 meters or greater from the side and rear property lines. However, Diamond Kilmer is still intent on maintaining a 7.5 meter setback on both sides or on the sides of the property. Now, according to what I found online, the frontage of the lot, it seems to be 39 meters wide. So if we subtract 7.5 meters on both sides, that would leave a development width of about 23.5 meters. Now, if the application adhered to the city's requirement of 12.5 meters, that would reduce that development further by another 10 meters. So essentially squeezing the building closer to the center of the lot, resulting in a development of no more than 13.5 meters. Now that's the issue really, that the lot, I believe, is just too small to support a development of this particular size. So a structure that would be built in response to those setbacks would be very different from the one that's being proposed. So as I say here in my notes, simply put, Diamond Kilmer has purchased a lot that's too small for its plans, and as hard as it may try, nothing will change the dimensions on which a responsibly designed development may sit. Now, the second issue I want to bring up involves traffic. And the increased neighborhood traffic that would likely result from this particular development. So in this proposed amendment, Diamond Kilmer went from a number of residents initially identified as 214, which were largely seniors, down to 197 residents. That was the most recent iteration of this proposal. And it has also reduced a proposed 3-story underground parking garage to 2 stories. So we've seen approximately an 8% drop in the number of potential residents and a drop of parking by about 33%. So the question is, where will residents and workers seek parking? While the site is situated, I have to acknowledge, on a major transit route. So Broadview Avenue has a steady stream of buses that do go down to the Broadview subway station. But I can attest to the fact that it's, for many people, Chester Hill seems to be a little too far from the Broadview subway stop. I do not see many residents at all walking or, in fact, taking transit at the Broadview Chester Hill stop. So this then, if workers and residents follow suit, despite its proximity to a major traffic spot, transit stop, it is just a little too far away. So I think that this will lead to an even higher number of cars seeking parking on Chester Hill Road or Cambridge. Now, these streets are already overburdened by people who are driving into the city and parking for free on our streets and then going downtown. The city did recently install a no parking before 7 a.m. sign, but that simply means at 7:01, you can see a steady stream of cars coming in, a mad scramble for parking that takes up all the neighborhood street parking. So I cannot imagine how an increase of almost 200 residents plus workers will be able to be accommodated for on the city streets or the streets in our neighborhood, chiefly Cambridge and Chester Hill Road. So for these reasons and several others, as I wrap up here, I applaud the City Council in rejecting Diamond Kilmer's insufficient amendments in its application, and I encourage you, the members of City Council, to continue to support development that does create more robust communities. And yes, I acknowledge that does include densification, intensification, and you need to continue to reject proposals that do negatively impact the very communities that developers claim to be wanting to be a part of while demonstrating otherwise. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for David? Councillor Fletcher.
I just have one, Mr. Chair. Yes, David, you're rightly asking about where everybody's going to be parking. I just want to make sure you're aware that even if the Ontario Land Tribunal makes a decision about this development, that it is this committee at Toronto and East York Community Council that can determine there'll be no permit parking allowed from these buildings or the new buildings.
I'm aware of that, Councillor Fletcher.
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, though.
Yeah, and then that recently this committee, 4 wards had all streets that weren't formerly covered by permit parking, now covered by permit parking. And that includes all of the streets. I think Chester Hill is now all permit parking, Thorncliffe as well. So that's another way to regulate who's parking overnight.
As I
Would
said,
you
though,
agree?
it is interesting to see how commuters do come in at 7:01 and look for spots and then go down to the Broadway station. But that's another
Right.
another
But we
issue
can
for another
always,
time.
but we can always amend the time of starting. So just, there's a few flexibility things. I just want to make sure you're aware it's not covered by any decisions at the
Well, my
LPAT.
point was just with potentially 200 residents plus
I
and
understand.
increase in parking. Yeah.
And the developer really does have to let everybody know that if they don't get a parking spot, there's a problem for them. So we will try to make sure.
Visitors to
Should
the
this
residents.
proceed.
And
Pardon?
if they are senior residents too, just the number of visitors that will likely show up as well is another concern.
Yes, and I don't know what the visitor parking situation is in the application, but they do have to have that too. But thank you very much for stepping in for Chester Hill.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you. The next deputant that I have listed here is Paula Davies. Paula, are you with us? Not present. Rob Corcoran? Rob, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hi, Rob. Yes, I can. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, folks, very much. I'd like to say I do appreciate the city's steps in the planning process to review and seek to ensure that the application for the development on the Stony House property is compatible with the planning. I participated on a stakeholder advisory committee with the Broadview Avenue planning study, and it was a breath of fresh air to see the city taking such an active role in planning and in a coordinated development and growth strategy to provide development to meet the goals in terms of growth, because the city is certainly growing, provide gradual infrastructure updates to support that, and maintain compatibility with their very livable neighborhoods. As you're aware, this is a very well evolved portion of the city. The community, the mix of buildings that we have and residents makes it one of the most enjoyable areas to live in. I think each area of the city, I'm sure we have similar views, but it's worked well over the years. My family have been here just shy of 100 years at 44 Chester Hill Road. We're a few months away from the century point at this time. And it's been a great neighborhood to live in over the years. The city's efforts for mid-rise planning had been based upon a very effective strategy. You know, the Wild West approach that we saw through the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, where high rises were going up pell-mell, was a challenge. You know, areas quickly changed, and the planning with suitable elevation planes for development, with suitable setbacks, compatibility with the appropriate flow from neighborhoods to mid-rises to higher rises was very well thought out. Looking at the plans submitted for the Estonian House, they seem to certainly go well beyond both the high-rise and the mid-rise designations. It's not a high-rise location, but even if the tall building rules were applied, as Dave noted, there would be some concerns. At the Broadview Avenue planning study meetings, city planning made it clear that they felt that the site was unsuitable for a high-rise. As Dave noted, you know, the 12.5-meter setbacks for the tower would be restrictive, and the lot itself is really L-shaped. You've got the 958 lot within which the tower would be placed, which is less than 30 meters wide, then the frontage from 954, 956, and 958 to which they would use for access to the property. And so the actual tall building restrictions would be with an even narrower lot, leaving perhaps 5 meters for the acceptable width for a tower, which seems kind of absurd. For the rear of the lot, I guess when this site was discussed, and it was discussed in heated discussions and multiple discussions through all of the community sessions, the unique features of the lot were front and center, you know, through the community consultations during VAPS. And the site was designated as a mix of green space and zone A, which is the mid-rise developments to the south. The application seems to treat it as a high-rise without green space, where they have a tall building in the front and a 4-story building at the back. The concept of a 4-story structure doesn't seem to work with the angular plane concept from the rear of the side yards beside it. And it also erases any privacy for houses there. If there's a green space on top of the 4-story with people out standing about there a few meters from the lot line, what do you have in terms of privacy from your backyard, from your bedrooms and your houses? It erases that, which just doesn't seem right either from a development perspective. And the concepts we were told before for the project, when discussing with planners nearly a decade ago, were that it would probably be suitable for a townhouse development, 3-story townhouses in the lot, which fit from the zoning at the time. And so I guess we would like to see the city able to carry forward with the direction they've provided, in trying to find a solution that fits, the development of the property with an appropriate sized solution to carry it forward. I think the city worked very effectively with the work at the Whistler's property at the corner of Mortimer and Broadview, 995 to 1005 Broadview, where they were able to agree upon a development there, which I guess stands as a precedent in this case. The lot width is about the same as 958, about 30 meters wide. Their development there is only 1 story above the Avenue Plan 6-story height limit, which I think was a fair concession to make, providing a viable property for the development of that site. How is that any different really from a scenario here? So seeking something which fits the property, which enables appropriate development, enables compliance with the very well executed plans the city has put into place for mid-rise development, would, in my mind, be a very appropriate solution. And I applaud the city's efforts to seek to do so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Rob? No? Rob, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. Next I have...
Thank you.
Good. Arlene Samlesing. Arlene, are you with us? Arlene has dropped off. Richard Gerskup? Not present. So neither of them is connected at all. Okay. That was all of the deputations that I had listed for this item. Are there any questions of staff?
I just want to have one question on the process, please, Mr. Chair.
Sure, the floor is yours.
Thank you. What has happened is the developer has now taken this to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and there is an agreement to attempt mediation. I guess I'm asking City Legal on this.
Mr. Chair, it's Ray Callio, Legal Services. Yes, they have appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. They did reach out and ask if we were interested in mediation, which of course we always are.
And so just so the very interested community members, not only those who made deputations, I'm sure others are watching, there'll be an attempt at mediation. Should that fail, what would the next step be, Mr. Callio? What would happen then?
If, Mr. Chair, if mediation fails, that is to say staff doesn't have recommendation for a settlement to you, then we would seek a date from the tribunal and we'd have a hearing.
So this is a step to see if there's any ability to come to an agreement. And should that not happen, then there'll be a full hearing at the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we're not actually at the hearing stage, it's just a mediation stage. Okay. That's really, I think, got to be clear as to what the pathway is going to be. Thank you very much.
Any other questions of staff? No, seeing none. Councillor Fletcher, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to move the staff recommendations, and I'm going to thank the deputants for coming and all of those who sent letters saying that they appreciate that the city is going to the Ontario Land Tribunal to defend its position. This is one of those ones, and I think Councillor Longtown mentioned that earlier. She'd picked up something in the new ward. This is one that I picked up in the Ford Diet of 25 wards. And it is really a long and winding road. on Broadview for a number of sites, including this one, that were appealed to the LPAT at the time of that they should not be in the Broadview planning study. So the city has been very clear that our OPA 343 is in force, and the need to see every development in the 3 sites that are remaining through this lens. And this is where we ended up. This has been appealed a number of times or under appeal since 2018. So things grind slowly. I do want to acknowledge the feeling that the Estonian House somehow, which had been such a great neighbor for so many years, it's the one place in the community that had a big hall. So many things happened there. Public meetings happened there. Shakespeare in the Rough had its parties there. Community meetings there on interesting topics. That will be removed. That publicly rentable community space will be gone. And that throughout this whole period, it's been a yo-yo. The original suggestion from Estonian House, they had a partner, they'd build an 11-story, and then Rivera came in with an 18-story, and then the first DK was at 16 stories. So this is just a community obviously feeling that it's a very difficult development application. It had been high at the back. Along Chester Hill, it has been reduced. Not sure that it has been reduced enough. There's traffic considerations and, as you've heard, parking considerations. So I just did ask Mr. Callio the process so everybody's clear. We're going to mediate. He'll be there. That he's now in charge of the file, that he'll have help from planners, but he's negotiating. And I believe there are also parties there from the neighborhood that will be there at mediation. Should that not work, then it would be a full hearing, and I'm sure we would have to move to do that. So I do want to thank city planning for their work. I want to thank the neighborhood for being vigilant, and also the developer for trying to get to, doing his best to try to get to something that would work for the community, but that hasn't happened. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will move the recommendations in this report.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. That takes us to TE 28.9, inclusion on the City of Toronto's Heritage Register, Geary Avenue. We have a deputant on this item, Sandy DeFelice. Sandy?
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Sandy. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for accommodating this deputation. I'm here today on behalf of my parents, the 86-year-old owners of 44 and 46 Geary Avenue. They've owned these properties for over 40 years, and they've been very proud stewards of these properties, and they're frustrated at having to defend their interests in a process in which they continue to be marginalized. They're concerned with the punitive limitations that are being applied to their ownership and the rapid pace of these proceedings, especially during COVID. Having registered their objection to the heritage listing at the city planning, the council, preservation board meetings, they find the proposed listing incongruent to the community use and planning. The Geary Works project, despite its characterization as a support to cultural enterprises, is in part engineered as a response to the significant number of zoning and development concessions in the community. Geary Avenue is a mishmash of auto repair shops, metal fabricators, industrial buildings, and parking lots opposite a CP corridor. As noted by a member of the Preservation Board last week, there is no theme that links the properties for historical or associated value. If historic value were to be considered, the several dozen residential properties listed in the Davenport community should be considered as part of this effort. The character of the area has no physical, functional, or visual link and demonstrates an inequitable treatment of planning principles, including the DuPont and Christie concessions, to tear down a similarly aged structure that interferes with a significant redevelopment. The Galleria Shopping Plaza, a unique commercial community cornerstone, rezoned and removed. Large number of laneway houses that are redefining the community character and use. The overbuilding of homes on properties just north of these two properties in the Davenport community, and the heritage listing exclusion of the brick property that is currently under development planning review. Councillor planning and heritage teams reactively advised on this process, and they did not proactively consult with stakeholders. This is a troubling irony in light of the committee's comments at the beginning of this meeting about Edward Lamont and the right of citizens to be heard to saying no. Additionally, this is compounded by the fact that the city's archives continue to restrict access to the public, and the specific font materials related to documents that support incorrect and selective information presented in today's report. Profoundly disappointed, my parents continue to oppose the listing of 44 and 46 Geary Avenue on the city's heritage register. I thank you for your time, and I point you to the photographs that were submitted as part of the written submission this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Are there any questions? Councillor Bailao, questions of Sandy?
It's just a quick question, Sandy. I was under the understanding that you did have a few meetings with planning staff and heritage. Is that correct?
So, Councillor Bailao, they responded to the questions that we had and provided information on process. At no point were we engaged as stakeholders on the listing, on what it meant, and the impacts. The same that we were not consulted in terms of the zoning changes that were proposed for the property. You know, we're not asking for any of this, Councillor. We're responding. We find ourselves in a situation where we are responding. Your staff and the teams have been very good about procedural information. No inherent understanding of how we could possibly have a voice in this process.
Okay, but part of the process is that consultation, which you did have an opportunity as well to meet with staff.
Councillor Bailao, my parents are 86 years old. They were not online until just recently. The tenants in their building have no obligation to provide them with the notifications that may or may not have been received in the mailboxes. We were actually not invited to consult as part of this process. And then when we tried to raise it after the fact, that didn't happen either. We were advised on process.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions of the deputy? No, seeing none. Sandy, thank you so much for joining us today. That's all the deputies that I have listed. Are there any questions of staff? Councillor Bailao.
Yes. Just to staff. So this came from the planning study and planning economic development study that we did, and Heritage was involved and recommended that we listed these properties, correct?
That's correct.
So this is just a listing just for future protection, correct?
Yes, the listing is in place so that the property can be considered should it be subject to any redevelopment or change.
Okay. And I was under the impression that there was communications with this specific person that had some concerns with the family. Is that correct? Was there?
Yes, I believe Ms. Di Felice acknowledged that we have had conversations. We have explained what listing means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't place restrictions on the building at all. It's just if it comes up for demolition, then the city has an opportunity to consider whether or not it has heritage value significant enough to warrant its designation. So it's a signaling it's an early signaling that we're doing across the city of heritage value.
Okay. Thank you.
Those all the questions of staff? Good. Councillor Bailao, the floor is yours.
Councillor, I'm going to move staff recommendations. This is part of the work that we're doing on Gary with that includes several departments from economic development to planning, to really ensure that this street is a street where makers, creators can continue to thrive in there. So there's a lot of work being done in there. And Heritage was involved and strongly recommended that we listed these properties. As our team, our staff explained, this is not full designation, but it does give the opportunity to staff, if there is any development coming, to look if it is appropriate or not. So I will move staff recommendations. Thank them for their work.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And I guess we also need to receive 9A, which is the letter from the Preservation Board. Yeah? No? No? Okay. No, all good. I always get confused by that.
Only if it's different.
Right. And unfortunately, my notes never. Okay. Item TE 28.10, 1007 Craven Road, notice of intention to designate a property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act and authority to enter into
You
a
removed
heritage
that
easement
earlier,
agreement.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, we withdrew it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good thing Councillor Fletcher is paying attention. Item TE 28.11, application to remove a private tree, 51 Walker Avenue. I have no deputants. Are there any questions of staff? No. This one is Councillor Matlow. Floor is yours.
I'm going to move the staff recommendation.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Application to remove a private tree, 55 Dixon Avenue. I have no deputations. Councillor Bradford, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the staff recommendations, please.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item TE 28.13, changes. Oh, no, that's it. Okay. Pardon me, 23? Okay. Yeah. Item TE 28.23, 145 St. George Street, zoning bylaw amendment and rental housing demolition applications, preliminary report. We have a deputant here, Rita Billerman. Rita?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Rita, good morning. Just made it in by morning. I'll be giving you 5 minutes to address the committee. You can start as soon as you're ready.
Great, thank you. My name is Rita Billerman, and I am the chair of the Annex Residents Association. And as you said, I'm here to speak about the demolition of 145 St. George. We've also submitted correspondence on this, which I see on your website. And as you know, this matter relates to a 1959 12-story rental apartment building in the annex. It also contains 130 affordable and mid-range units. It is structurally sound and has been well maintained over the years. In Toronto, as you know, about half the population are renters, not owners. In the annex, it may surprise you, that number is more than 70%. These are our neighbors. They're your neighbors, and they form the fabric of our communities. This proposal raises many issues. Our letter includes planning concerns, but today we wish to highlight 4 principles that form the basis of why we object to this proposal and submit that you should object, that you too should object. First is the human context. This site is not a parking lot, nor an underutilized parcel of land. It is home to valued neighbors, many of whom have lived there for decades, 3 of them for more than 50 years. The prospect of displacement late in life is nothing short of devastating and life-altering. Where do they go? How do they manage? Housing security is recognized as a core element of mental health. Life in the pandemic has been stressful enough. Now just imagine adding the threat of eviction to that stress. In reality, these people face a loss of community, a loss of security, a loss of dignity, and in many cases, a loss of independence. Yet they find themselves just pawns on the developer's chessboard. Second, the housing crisis. In the midst of a housing crisis, the proposal contemplates the demolition of 130 affordable and mid-range units, housing that is increasingly difficult to find in our own neighborhood. And to be turned into a luxury ghetto through demolition. Consider, while the developer is obliged to replace the existing affordable housing units, that obligation lasts only 10 short years. Meanwhile, the bulk of the proposed units must rent at luxury or higher than average Toronto prices. But how else could the project produce a profit, considering the extraordinary expense of demolishing the present building? The very real prospect is the eviction of long-term tenants to the benefit of buyers who buy units solely for their investment value. How is this really helping the affordable housing crisis? And as you have heard from many today, they and we support density done right, but we're all very concerned about the lack of affordable housing and strongly urge the city and province to create bolder policy on this. Third, the climate crisis. The City of Toronto has set a lofty goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The unwarranted demolition of 145 St. George is not only hostile to achieving this, but represents a worrying precedent for such cavalier demolitions citywide. We aren't alone. There are many of these apartment neighborhoods across Toronto, all of which face similar threats if this project is to be sanctioned. Carbon emissions are typically discussed in terms of operations, the heating of a building, the running of a car, the turning on of lights. Yet embodied carbon, the emissions from construction, material extraction, manufacturing, transportation, and on-site construction processes is equally costly to our environment, according to the UN. Who's really paying for these costs? The developer, the occupants, the city, or is it us? The world is waking up to this. The highest prize for architecture in 2021 was awarded to French architects whose credo is never demolish, never remove or replace, always add, transform, and reuse. Their work is focused on replenishing low-income housing complexes, aesthetically and functionally. And get this, while respecting rather than replacing the tenants who live there. Why can't Toronto do this as well? Fourth, the domino effect. Buildings similar to 145 St. George exist along St. George right now, and in fact, in every area of the city. Should this domino fall, you can expect more of these proposals in every ward in Toronto. This is not a matter of speculation. Just look down the agenda at TE 28.29, where the same developer is proposing to demolish a 24-story apartment building at 25 St. Mary Street and construct two towers of 54 and 59 stories, displacing 259 rental units. So to recap, we don't think tenants should be pawns in a developer's chess game. We don't want the annex turned into a luxury ghetto. Let's observe the climate-saving mantra of reduce, reuse, recycle, and let's stop the domino effect. Therefore, we ask, what is this proposal really adding to our neighborhood, to our city, and more importantly, at what environmental and social costs? We ask that you think critically of this and respectfully oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Are there any questions for Rita? Councillor Wong.
Yes, thank you very much, Rita. Thank you. I hope, Rita, you can hear me. And thank you for taking the time to come out and speak to the committee today. I wanted to ask, with respect to tenants and how they're being treated right now in this building, I agree with you that the application is quite aggressive. I'm just curious to know what type of communications has been in place with the tenants. How are they engaged with the planning process? And if you've noted, I have a very similar application coming in my community. I just want to understand what's happening on the other side of the ward.
Right. Well, I can't really speak for them, but I know the city has been in touch with them. I've been at meetings myself with them. So, those channels of communication are open, but I can't speak for the tenants.
And, but you have spoken to them?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
And would you say that the tenants are scared about the future, that they're nervous that they will be displaced, that perhaps there isn't going to be a proper relocation for them, that they might even be homeless? Like, is that a legitimate, I guess, summary of what the tenants may be feeling?
I think that's more than legitimate. That is actually at the heart of the matter. There are many people in the building who can't even afford to move. And if they do move, it will not be in the annex and possibly into the shelter system.
Yeah, Rita, thank you. And I guess with respect to the process, I mean, the planning process is pretty regimented. I think you know that, especially coming from such an esteemed residents association. An application has been filed, so we have to sort of go through the technical motions of the review. Is there anything that you believe that Councillor Layton or myself should do to ensure that that, you know, number one, we follow the quote unquote process that's prescribed for us? That's statutory. That's not really too flexible. But what other things you think we can do to support the tenants and the community at large as you face this development review?
Well, I think I would ask you to really look at the costs, because I saw in the report, you know, that there are no budgetary considerations, but I flatly disagree with that. Where are these environmental costs going? You know, there's a whole ESG movement happening now in the financial world, and I think it's readily apparent that so many of these costs are not being fully captured. And I would argue that quite strongly in this case. Who's going to pay for all these people that are moving? And when they go into the shelter system, does that make sense? I mean, our system is broken. I mean, we've heard that from other people as well, right? It shouldn't just be developers making a lot of money.
Right. Thank you. And thank you for your comments today.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
No, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. That's all the deputants that I have listed. Any questions of staff? No? Whose is this one? Councillor Layton, that's what I
Fine, Board.
Yeah.
Yes, my apologies if there's background noise. My neighbor's getting a new roof. If the clerk's questions on the page, please, on the screen. The page, what are we? 2015. That the Director of Community Planning, Toronto and East York, in consultation with other appropriate city divisions, reports on the environmental impacts of demolishing the existing building at 145. Director of Community Planning, Toronto East York District, include consideration of the broader built form implications of the application on the St. George Street Apartment Neighborhoods Corridor in the report requested above. And 3, the Director's Strategic Initiatives and Policy connect the tenants of 145 St. George Street with legal services and invite legal clinic workers to all meetings involving tenants and provide an opportunity for one-on-one breakouts for tenants to receive legal support. You know, I share the concerns that were voiced by Rita earlier. This is an application that exists on the, let's call it the edge of TO core, and it wasn't policy for apartment neighborhoods, existing apartment neighborhoods, wasn't contemplated in the TO core work that was done. And in TO core, this is right on the edge of, I think, mixed use area 4. And so I'm struggling to believe that we can't have some policy around these neighborhoods that were kind of etched out of the TO core model to kind of remain. I was of the belief that meant they were to remain static, or at least somewhat static, in as they were identified as being fairly built out neighborhoods previously. And so I have some concern that there's a gap there in our policy that I think it warrants some examination. And as was outlined by the deputant, she's quite right. This is the first of what would be likely several acquisitions of existing apartment multi-unit residential housing that would then be turned into taller buildings as a result of this. There is a lot of intensification happening very close to this site as well. And so taking into consideration what policy gaps exist and studying them further is, I think, warranted. I also think that there is some merit in the argument that there is embedded carbon in this building, and this is a perfectly good building to remain standing, and perhaps we could focus any new carbon emissions that we're going to use to build buildings on other sites, rather than taking what is a multi-unit residential building and simply tearing it down and building up anew. And finally, to the point around tenant relocation, we have had, the developer did host a early, but we flyered the building at an early stage to ensure that residents knew their rights and knew they had resources that they could access. The developer did host a meeting where they talked through what the process will look like for tenant relocation. We've negotiated some pretty significant packages in the past, and that's what we discussed with tenants, so that they weren't signing away their rights as tenants simply for the 3 months rent that they're entitled to under the RTA, because our staff have done much better around moving allowances and those pieces. So we want to make sure these tenants know, and that if we end up approving the project, and that's a pretty big if we end up approving the project in the end, that their considerations will and their peace of mind will be factored into that decision, and what resources we receive from the developer in order to relocate. But we're a long way from that. This step is simply to authorize the public to have the public meeting. I have no doubt it'll be well attended. I also share some of the staff concerns around the current proposal as it stands. And so I want more information. I want to make sure our tenants are supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions of the mover? Anyone else to speak? Okay, on Councillor Layton's motion and the staff advice together, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. We have 3 or 4 little bits of housekeeping to do. Councillor Wong Tam, you held TE 2828, which is the 98 to 100 Bond Street and 54 to 74 Dundas East zoning application, and you had an amendment, 2 amendments as I recall.
Yes, and I apologize that we couldn't get our motions to the clerk earlier this morning. We were just having some problems with Outlook. That has now been resolved.
Okay.
The motion is now before you, councillors, to set up a site plan working group, as well as to ensure accommodations are provided for the public meeting.
Okay, thank you. On the amendment and the item, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Councillor Wong Tam on item TE 2829, 25 St. Mary Street, official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and rental housing demolition applications. You had an amendment?
Yes, thank you. I do have a, yes, I do. And I also want to just speak to the matter. The amendment is to ensure that there's accommodations provided for the public meeting, but also very similar to what Councillor Layton just moved, is to ensure that we can take a review of the application with an environmental lens. So that means that we take a look at the environmental impacts of demolishing such a tall building on St. Mary Street, as well as, of course, making sure that it fits within the OPA that was just recently approved, and as well as defended successfully. Well, to certain parts of it defended successfully at the Ontario Land Tribunal, as well as making sure that if you can scroll down, making sure that the tenants in the building who will be dramatically affected will have access to legal services and legal clinic workers. We know that there's 260 tenants, or at least almost 260 apartments, and we need to make sure that these individuals, some of them who are vulnerable and elderly, have access to independent legal advice, or they can work on it collectively. It's entirely up to them. And then finally, I want to make sure that the city planning at their discretion can hold a working group with the tenants of 225 St. Mary, the Bay Clover Hill Community Association, and any other city officials in my office as we get to a final approval or refusal or decision. But at least there's more community input, and that's something that I'm very interested in pursuing. And I just want to speak very briefly about this application. This application coming in from 10 Block is extremely aggressive. By every account, they are asking for Bay Street, high podium, high-rise buildings, and there's not a single street here that this site sits on that actually is on Bay Street. So therefore, demanding and requesting Bay Street typology is entirely out of order. Not to mention the fact that it actually is a building that has 260 rental units, some of them affordable, some of them mid-range affordability. But all that being said is that it's a building that works. There's many families who are there. There are people who've lived there for a number of years, and there's absolutely no reason why there is a need to, in my opinion, to submit an application asking for two very large Bay Street typology buildings on St. Mary. It is going to be a very aggressive application, and I cannot see a path forward to approval right now, the way it has been submitted. The other thing I want to note is that there's a surface parking lot. There is some open space around the building. There can be a very elegant and I think a very respectful addition made to the existing building without tearing it down. It is an ecological waste of energy and resources in the existing building, but not to mention the fact that it's going to just not necessarily give us new community benefits to the area that is already very intensified. We have 34 trees on this site or adjacent to the site in some proximity that will have to come down for this application. And you will all know how long it takes to grow a mature tree. And I think that all of us can respect that the downtown core has been a place of intensification. We don't shy away from tall buildings. We've got 80 and 90-story buildings coming along our major avenues, along Yonge Street, along Bloor Street, along Bay Street, but this is not one of those streets. So I hope that, you know, the developer who I'm sure is listening to my remarks is that, number one, you'll treat the tenants fairly and respectfully moving forward. That I shouldn't see any bullying tactics or any type of pressure to have them move out earlier. I know there's 55, I believe, empty units right now. That's 55 too many, especially in a housing crisis. And hopefully you can repopulate those units, because there's no reason they should be sitting empty. The other thing is that, you know, I know that city planning has shared their early concerns with you. They have told you that the application is aggressive. It is not supportable in its current form. So I expect you to come to the table very quickly and take these concerns very seriously, and then to incorporate some changes as soon as possible in your application, so we don't have to go out to the community and show them two aggressive, oversized built towers in a neighborhood where you have to take down 34 trees, and so it doesn't make sense. Give us something respectful and sensible to work with, and we will work with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of the mover? Seeing none, we'll take the amendment and the item together. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Next, Councillor Wong-Tam, you held TE 28.30, construction staging area 55 through 61 Charles Street East. You had an amendment? Okay. Can we just vote on that, or did you want to speak to it, Councillor Wong-Tam?
I just want to speak very briefly. I just want to note that this is not a 5-year road occupancy, it's a 1-year road occupancy, and there's a number of conditions to try to make the area safer. Charles Street already has a large number of development on both sides of the street, north side and south side of the street. Everybody's asking for road and sidewalk occupancies. These developers and the construction crews are creating a very untenable situation for our community, and we need to rein it in to the best that we can. So I'm speaking specifically transportation and to our work zone coordinator. You have a lot of discretionary powers to insist on additional safety measures. I hope that you do that in this case, but in case you need a friendly reminder, I'm putting it all in here for you to take a look at, and I want to make sure that it's going to be done. We oftentimes move motions here, and I find out later on that it's not executed well or it's not well implemented, and then I have to be, and my office has to be, the enforcer. We don't have the resources to do that. That is your job. Please get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the mover? On the amendment and the item, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Members, I now need to move a motion to reconsider item TE 28.35. There was an incorrect number in the staff report. So if I can just have that up. Okay, so first I need to move to reconsider the item. All those in favor, opposed, carried. And this just contains a couple of corrections. I think it's changing the number 6 to number 12 at one point. I think that's what it does when referring to the number. Yeah. Okay. So on the motion, all those in favor, opposed, carried. I now need a motion to introduce new business item 28.61. Oh.
6.2.
Items 6.1 and 6.2. Well, the clerks are indulging me. I made a mistake. And they're just saying, oh, let him make a mistake. I just need to introduce item 28.62 and add it to the agenda. All those in favor, opposed, carried. So now we need to deal with 6.1 and then 6.2, is that right? Okay. So I don't know what item 6.1 is. Okay, so members, as you can see, this is a letter exempting 319, 321 Jarvis Street from Area 6G. It's a letter from Councillor Wong Tam. Councillor Wong Tam, do you have anything to say on this?
No, just thank you very much to my staff who helped write the motion, and this is another one of those things that we have to do after building has been approved, which is to remove them from the on-street permit area.
Okay, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item 6.2. Okay, this is a letter from Councillors Cressy, Wong Tam, and Fletcher pertaining to the Ontario Line transit-oriented community proposals.
Yeah, thank you. Can I, Mr. Chair, can I just speak to it very quickly? I don't know if the other councillors are here, but I know we've worked on this. We worked on this letter jointly, so please take my remarks as on behalf of all of them. I think that Councillor Fletcher, as well as Councillor Cressy and I, are very concerned about the transit-oriented communities that are attached to the Ontario Line construction. Many of these applications are being many of the proposals for development, I should say, are being submitted by the province to the city for consideration, but it's oftentimes done without the consent of the community. There's no public process for review of these proposals from the community, and what we want to do is make sure that everything that is development oriented along the transit line has a robust public consultation. And so that means that we believe that preliminary reports, which should come to this community council, which is where they belong, so members of the public can actively review the application, be involved with the working group process. The ones that have to still be established, they have a place to go. And I wanted to say that on behalf of Councillor Fletcher, I see her, she's back on the screen, as well as Councillor Cressy. We're very concerned, and we want to work together collaboratively with all of you to make sure that good, solid planning comes to our neighborhoods, and it's not necessarily going to be development-oriented transit. We want the transit to be specifically built. Of course, we all want that, but we want to make sure that those developments make sense for our area, and so that's what this letter is about. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher.
If I can, Mr. Chair, yes, just as well, and thank my two colleagues for working on this letter and submitting it here, because even last night, we understand from the East Harbour consultation, it is a developer-led consultation. It's not a city-led consultation, and it's just so far from anything that anyone's used to. So we're just trying to normalize this process just a tiny little bit. So thank you for your support today. And then I just want to make one other remark, not related to this, Mr. Chair, but I think you'll indulge me. And we know that we lost a very dear colleague last week, Graham Mitchell, who had worked on the second floor, worked for Councillor Davis for many years, and then went in to work for Brenda Patterson when she was the general manager of Parks, Forestry, and Recreation as an issues manager, and then had a career doing so many things and dedicated to the progressive movement. But I did want to highlight one thing that I don't think anyone knows. Councillor Wong-Tam, you brought up your exclusion of the parking. That was actually something that in 2005 on Jones Avenue development that Graham suggested that we do. And that started in 2005. So from here on in, when we do that, we realize that was another creative brainwave from the wonderful, beautiful Graham Mitchell, who we will all miss very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh. Yeah, we all miss Graham a lot. Okay. So on the recommendations in the letter, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay.
Off mic, I'd just like to have it recorded if you don't mind. Mr.
Sure.
Chair.
Yeah, we'll have a recorded vote on that.
Thank you.
If there are any other members who aren't on my screen currently, I can't see Councillor Bradford or Councillor Cressy. No? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Bailao, Councillor Layton, Councillor Matlow, Councillor Wong-Tam, Councillor Perks as well. So that's unanimous of the members present. Okay, members, the only thing we have left to do is the in-camera item that I held. Given the amount of time it takes to get into camera and out of camera, I'm going to suggest that we move just to complete the agenda. Oh, Councillor Bradford's here. Councillor Bradford, did you want to be recorded on the previous item? Or if you didn't know what it was, that's fine. Okay. Sorry, I'm just... Okay. I'm going to suggest that we move to complete the agenda. We won't be in camera long. I just have a few things to say and one or two questions of staff. So I'm going to move that we extend to complete the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I'm now going to move that the Toronto East York Community Council recesses its public session to meet in closed session to consider the following item as it relates to receiving advice or communications that are subject to solicitor-client privilege and contains information regarding potential litigation. The item is TE 28.5, 1540 to 1550 Bloor Street West zoning amendment, request for direction. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, if I could ask any staff who... The staff members who should stay are the... No, I don't need to do that. Oh. I will now ask the clerk to close the meeting to members of the public and only provide access to members and appropriate staff for the closed session portion of the meeting. In addition, the live stream will be suspended until the closed session is over. If you wish to rejoin the meeting following the closed session, please watch the meeting monitor, see when the closed session has ended at this link. Members and staff, I would ask you to arrange your surroundings so that no other person observe any part of this closed session debate. If I was at home, this means I'd have to tell my family to all go upstairs. Okay, we'll just be a minute. Yeah. Okay, thank you. We're now completed our in-camera session. No motions were moved. And that leaves us with just the main item to discuss. And this is the development application at 1540 Bloor. And I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments. First, I want to acknowledge the tremendous work done by the community in the West Bend neighborhood, as they describe themselves, on this site over the last 13 years. We very successfully developed an avenue bylaw. We developed a local zoning bylaw. We won a case at the Ontario Municipal Board over this property. And now we find ourselves with this application in front of us, and unfortunately with confidential advice from city staff. And those members of the community who have worked so hard over years to fight for good planning in the neighborhood find themselves not knowing what decision community council is making because we can't share that advice right now. I think it's a deep and fundamental problem with the way that planning applications are dealt with in the Ontario system. My intention is to pursue this on a general policy basis through the Planning and Housing Committee in an upcoming meeting because it goes beyond the scope of just this one community council. I also do want to acknowledge that city staff have worked very, very hard over the years in this part of the city, in this neighborhood, and accomplished an awful lot of good. And with that, I'm going to move the staff recommendations. Oh, Councillor Matlow, yeah.
I'd like to make just a brief comment, if I may, just in case any members of your community are listening. While it is frustratingly impossible to discuss the content of the confidential information, what I can share is that what I did hear from Councillor Perks is a complete commitment to transparency, upset that his community is not able to participate in understanding all of the content of the information, given the legal requirements that Councillor Perks is subject to rather than his choosing. And I was very impressed by Councillor Perks's continued commitment to advocating for his community throughout this process. That is something again that he is subject to rather than would prefer to have to go through. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? No? Seeing none, then on the recommendations from staff, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. So that takes us to the bills. It's simplest if we just put them up and I read them. Yeah, I'll just read them quickly. I've got a 12:45, so I'm trying to race through the end here. I move that the Toronto East York Community Council pass and declare as bylaws bills 810, 818, 820 to 826 to prepare for the October 14th, 2021 meeting 28 of the Community Council. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Next. I read the first half of that without my glasses, so we'll hope I got it right. Okay. I move that the Toronto East York Community Council pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the Toronto East York Community Council acting under delegated authority at May 28 on October 14, 2021. All in favor, opposed, carried. And that completes our business. Thank you very much, members. Have a lovely afternoon. And thank you so much to city staff for blitzing us through 60 items in half a day. Take care, everybody. Bye.